Mate, I thought it was a very fair discussion today. I give you top marks for that.
Oh, well, that's high praise indeed.
Mate, on the Bank Royal Commission issue, one of the precipitating issues was the Commonwealth Bank's failure to report the cash transactions, 55,000 I believe. I had a meeting with Bill Shorten 5 years ago on behalf of a group called the Victims of Financial Fraud, who were defrauded of millions of dollars in relation to the Trio Capital matter. I briefed Bill Shorten and the heads of ASIC and APRA.
He was Financial Services Minister, or what was he at the
He was
time?
Financial Services Minister and Minister for Superannuation.
Super,
And I briefed him on the failure of the Tax Office and the AFP and ASIC to properly monitor AUSTRAC reports that would have reflected the $175 million that was stolen going to offshore tax havens. I briefed him on those shortcomings and I never heard a single reply from him or any of the other government officials. By all means, I think inquire into the banks, but also inquire into the failure of government agencies to properly use the information that they get. And I would be grateful for any commentary that you might be able to give to people in power on those
That's
matters.
really interesting, because I mean, we assume that it's corporate greed and failure of regulation, but if there were red flags that were raised before all this and no action taken.
Absolutely. I made a representation to the parliamentary committee that inquired into the Trio Capital failure, and I never got a mention
to the committee. So
I tried every avenue that I could, and no one from politicians to bureaucrats has ever sought further information from me, which I have indicated I would be delighted to provide.
But so they'd be public documents, your submission to the committee?
The information I supplied to Bill Shorten and the various parliamentarians was public information. But I wanted to be interviewed by appropriate parliamentary oversight agencies in relation to my knowledge as a former Commonwealth public servant in relation to these matters, and there has been an absolute cone of silence.
Bill, did you present them with evidence? Did you have documentary evidence that proved...
There is public documentary evidence that...
just need to be collated in a certain way and presented.
And I was prepared to provide... I asked questions about whether there were AUSTRAC reports relating to these $175 million outflows, and what was done about it. And
there'd have to be one there, because isn't AUSTRAC, isn't it?
Every international transaction. No, that's cash transactions. Every international transfer is itemised and, it's supposed to be, if the banks report them, as they normally do. Millions and millions of these transactions go on every year.
The question is then, we assume they've been itemised, because that would be a matter of course, whether they took any action on the basis of what...
Absolutely. And the Trio Capital matter went on for several years. The people, the Hong Kong-based scammers, had actually come to the attention of Australian authorities in relation to a previous scam, and all they had to do was keep tabs on these blokes for the future, and it's probable that the Trio Capital matter could have been stopped in the bud. And even if they didn't do that, if they had just monitored the AUSTRAC transactions, they could have stopped it in the bud as well. And no one seems to have been interested in following up on those matters. And of course there are other matters that I think should be followed up too. We'll maybe get to those at some point in the future. But thanks very much for your time, mate.
Always a pleasure.
Good